Hi there. Welcome to my talk on artificial wisdom. My name is Luan van Pletsen. I'm a software engineer and an artist. I work on the biological media that support our human experience, and also on the trajectory of human understanding through history. So my question that I'd like to focus on today is when we speak about artificial intelligence, what is intelligence? So I'd like you to begin by asking for yourself, what is the difference between intelligence and wisdom? And how do you use each of those words respectively? What are the different associations that you have with each of those symbols? For my purposes here today, I'm gonna say that intelligence is the ability to perform effectively and reliably towards a well-defined goal, whereas wisdom seems to be a somewhat less clear definition, but the sense of wisdom is typically the ability to know the right action to take when the path is not defined. We associate it with certain virtues like empathy, like patience and compassion, virtues which we know are wise to cultivate, even though we might not know in that moment how our actions are going to translate concretely into our goal. There's a certain context setting aspect to wisdom which allows for better movement, better movement through life, knowing better which paths to take and so on. So see for yourself there how those descriptions sit with yours and what you agree with and disagree with. Part of my motivation for this talk was considering the multiple aspects of intelligence. So how we might apply this amplifying ability that technology has to the full spectrum of human ability and human capability. So within that, we separate intelligence into many subsets, where those are kinesthetic, verbal, numerical, logical, also social intelligence, personal, inter and intrapersonal intelligence, all of these different faculties that we recognize it's useful to have different boxes for. And yes, although that map is still quite unclear. So when I did a search for the different types of intelligence, I found many different, all of these questions. It's unclear how many types of intelligence it makes sense to split them into. But we recognize that there are different faculties there that it's important to distinguish between. There's an interesting perspective that came when I was watching a discussion between Sadhguru, who's an Indian mystic, and David Eagleman, who's a neuroscientist, and they discussed the different aspects of mind and intelligence from each of their frameworks, and it was interesting. The yogic sciences, which Sadhguru is most familiar with, he laid out these 4 broad areas of mind. So he speaks about buddhi. Buddhi is the component of intellect, and yes, actually the way that they would define intellect encompasses all of these faculties of intelligence that we were speaking about just before. So all of our verbal or non-verbal, mathematical, numerical, bodily, kinesthetic, social intelligences are all encompassed by buddhi. This faculty of intelligence. He then goes on to define other aspects of mind, ahamkara, which is a sense of ego, although it's separate from it's a sense of identity, but it's identity in a sense, in a way it's different from our how we see ego in psychology. So it's it's your personal identity, your national identity, but it's an agency that then employs buddhi towards its ends. Manas, I found very interesting as well, is a facet of memory. So not memory as we typically understand it, but more a sense of also bodily memory. So how we hold emotional traces from past experiences. And very poetically he said, you may not know what your grandfather's nose looked like, but your body does, right? And has in part recreated it on your face. So there is this sense of memory in life being a dynamical system, or a system with memory, whether that is genetic or any other type. And then chitta he refers to as a cosmic intelligence, or the life force, like the underlying life impulse, is this intelligence which knows how to turn carrots and bread into a human being over the process of years, for example. So though it's a very interesting lens to place over the phenomenon of, or to make sense of the phenomenon of human mind. So I think it's interesting to look at another perspective, and it's particularly interesting to look at this time because we increasingly use since the advent of computers, our use of computers has influenced our behaviors in the sense that it is both it's affected the type of problems that we approach or tackle, because we have these systems which are incredibly efficient and effective at numerical reasoning and logical reasoning. We tend to address problems, and we tend to frame situations in ways which are easily computable, so the existence of computers in some way has shifted our behavior in that sense, but also since our increased use of computers has also affected our self-image. So we increasingly now use computer metaphors to speak about ourselves and the mind. So we use computational models as well to try and understand how the mind works, in this back and forth feedback process where the development of computers makes us behave in a way that best makes use of them, but also it affects the way that we see our mental processes at this critical time when we're trying to make computers more like us or replicate ourselves in machines. So it's very curious, and I think that's exactly why it's important to bring these different cultural perspectives into the debate about AI, or the discussion of what kind of mind and what kind of faculties we're trying to create, to ensure that we get a holistic view on the experience and capabilities of the human mind. All right, back to computer systems. So they're particularly good at verbal reasoning and numerical reasoning. And if I, for a second, borrow from a 2008 paper on artificial wisdom, while we can make sense maybe of this split between intelligence and wisdom as discrete symbols. So this paper was by Ben Goertzel, who's the founder of the artificial general intelligence movement. And he speaks about the split as the difference between defined problem intelligence and problem defining intelligence. So as an example there, we've got cancer diagnosis. So we can train a neural network to very effectively take medical imaging and give us a yes or no diagnosis on whether or not these images contain examples of cancer. So it's a defined problem. We know exactly for the given input what output we would like, and we can train there a faculty of human ability which used to take an expert many years to learn, whereas that's now something that we can externalize effectively in a computer system. But the goal of reducing the effects of cancer in humans, on the other hand, that's much more a mixture of tangible and intangible factors. So that's a problem defining intelligence that's required there. We've got it becomes about more than just the logistics and the government of medical infrastructure, or the process and procedure of diagnosis, but it's also, there are these moral questions that come into play. When you're facing elderly patients and considering different paths of care, do you prioritize quality of life? Do you prioritize length of life? These questions that really need human touch, that only we can have the answers to. So that would be this problem defining intelligence that we're looking for, which we can equate with wisdom in this case. So if wisdom is the trait which we would like to see in the people that are making these abilities, that are making these decisions, then is there a way that we can bring some of that capability of wisdom into a computer system? And well, this is where I think that language, I think, is a good candidate here. While it may be limited, and there are certainly things to be said there for that faculty of our intelligence, of verbal reasoning. Here, I think it's an interesting trade-off that allows us to bring some of these other aspects into logical systems. And the reason why I think it's so good is that I think that language, it contains an imprinting of the personality of the author. So in that writing style, we can recognize the person who's speaking, and so that is something other than purely what's being said that we're picking up on. And so I wanted to see whether whether capturing this style in writing gives us some tangible grasp on wisdom or on these less tangible faculties. I took two sources. First, I'll present Alan Watts. So Alan Watts is he's a Zen scholar from the 20th century who translated a lot of this type of thinking for the Western audience. So he distills much of what Zen Buddhism is saying in a way that is easily approachable to the Western mind. And so here are a couple of his quotations. I think it captures as well a lot of that unconventional aspect of these traditions that they're so known for, especially the last one. So the last one, muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. It just speaks right to that place of where sometimes the right action is no action, which is it's like a typographical There's a out of the box thinking quality which is associated with that, which complements well logical systems and their rigidity. So a selection of 50 training quotations were taken from Alan Watts, and the particular algorithm I was using in this case, I took the GPT-3 transformer model. So this basically it takes an input text, and by performing probability analysis on the next most probable word based on its training from a whole series of text that's been scraped from the internet, and using this, it generates output sentences which match the same style as the input sentences. So the quotations that we got out were these, and the first one especially I quite like it. So when the mind takes a photograph, it does not capture the motion of life. And I mean, it sounds poetic, and it's got much of that same style and flair that Alan Watts loved to use and was so good at capturing in his writing. But with many of these things, the question is going to be whether they are intrinsically profound, or whether they are just of a style, whether there's a certain style that promotes introspection and insight in humans. And so whether there is something about sounding insightful that is a quality that we can distill. But yes, the second one especially as well seems to sum up much of what Zen Buddhism is saying when it says you are not a person, you are the space between your thoughts. It's echoing quite accurately doctrines about the nature of your identity as a collection of stories. So the ways in which your thoughts about yourself and the stories that you have about yourself, those are what make up your identity. And Buddhism says ultimately that this is illusory, it's quite a nice summing up of those ideas in a quotation. And the final one I'd like to talk about is this: we spend a lifetime trying to find happiness apart from God, and it is only when we come to Him that we experience true joy. It was fascinating, mostly because the symbol God didn't appear in any of the training quotations. So out of those 50 quotations, in the way that the algorithm translates words into numbers, or it's mapping the words onto a space of meaning. That space of meaning, where certain words cluster together, so words like book and novel would be close together, and words like countries, names of countries are close together. Very interesting geometrical relationships as well between words that we can get into in the questions. But yeah, so the symbol God wasn't in any of the training quotations, but in the relationships between the words that were there, clearly enough adjacent concepts were touched to sort of to bring that out, which is very interesting, and I think perhaps indeed what the AI is saying here is some of that word of warning that we need to be very sure of the system that we're building, which is very, very relevant for the AI debate. The second text which I used was the Tao Te Ching, and the Tao Te Ching is a 6th century Chinese manuscript, which talks as well in very, very contradictory terms to get at this innate essence of life or of motion or of the progression and nature of things, which they call the Tao, and is the basis for Taoism as a tradition. And those I won't read now, but you can find those on the poster. And well, where I'd like to take this next, as an experiment, it would be great to see if a similar approach could be used to generate new and useful concepts or ideas when looking at conflict resolution, or if in a debate that is perhaps taking place over text, can you use a similar inference style to get the thoughts of a particular personage? So could we, whether it's using the text of Alan Watts or the text of Lao Tzu from the Tao Te Ching, or any other significant or influential figure who we admire for some aspect of their personality, although we can't necessarily exactly trace down how it is, can we use their writing to gain an insight into what they might feed into a particular situation, and can that generate new and meaningful ideas that we can work on? So that's an interesting aspect that I'd like to explore further. And well, to close, I think it's important to remember what was being said at the start, which is that verbal reasoning, while a very effective tool that we've used through science to make sense of the world, and written and tangible description to make sense between ourselves as members of a species and share information, it is also just one of our faculties, and so I mean, artificial wisdom as a broader concept of exploring digital analogies to all of the wide facets of human ability and sense making. It looks like an exploration also of our other facets and abilities. Well, thank you very much. You can find some follow-up links with this QR code here that will take you through to the page on my website. And specifically for this talk, there is a link to an article called Nagasena and the Capture that quite neatly follows on from the concepts which I'm discussing here. And you'll find a link to contact as well if you want to get in touch about any collaborations or further thoughts.